So, boom. Quite a lot of our patients when they come to clinic often have been told by their family or by their GPs or even by their cardiologists that their symptoms are due to stress. This is quite a generic term. It can be quite off-putting. But actually we do increasingly understand the impact that stress can have on our lives. And I think it's worth us unpacking it in a bit more detail. Can you tell us a bit more about what models there are to understand stress and what actually is stress?
So that's absolutely right, Mel. A lot of our patients who come to clinic will struggle a bit because they've been told they had stress. And I think a very nice model to put this in perspective is called the Yerkes-Dodson Law.
Hang on, hold on, tell us more about that.
Okay, so this is a model essentially where you have two axes. So on the y-axis is performance, on the x-axis is stress. So if you think about it, we all like to live in a linear graph, and if you just look at the graph that is depicted next to this video, you'll see that we all should be putting in 1 unit of stress on the x-axis to gain 1 unit of performance. And there are some who are super performers who will be able to put 1 unit of stress and get 2 units of performance if you're super highly charged.
So let's just use an example. So that could be, I'm going to exert myself a bit to walk to the bus stop,
Exactly.
and my performance is getting to the bus stop in good time. Or I'm going to put some effort into my report I've got to write for work,
Correct.
and my performance is getting it done on time. So a bit of effort for a bit of output.
Correct. It could also be performance in assimilating this message on YouTube.
Yeah.
So you spend 1 minute listening to this video,
Yeah.
how much of the information can you cognitively process
Yeah.
appropriately, and how much can you recall? That's
Yes.
also a unit of performance. So there are
Yeah.
very many ways to stack up this performance. And you can think of building up this stress curve for many aspects or facets of your life. As you said, physical, mental, cognition, emotional, also sleep. And so when we think about this, we're going up in a straight line. And if we keep stacking units of stress, let's say 1 unit of stress, there will come a point in time where your curve starts to flatten out. And further units of stress approaches a plateau. That means you can put 1 unit of stress in, instead of getting 1 unit of performance, you only get half a unit, or 0.5 or 0.2 of a unit of performance.
So there comes a point where I can work harder and harder, but I get less reward for what I'm doing.
Exactly. So you could be watching a video or writing a report or reading a book and find yourself not assimilating any of that information despite spending a lot of time or trying hard to concentrate. That's the point at which stress, any additional unit of stress or time you spend on the task, will not give you any incremental benefit.
Okay.
And
what would happen then
Yes.
if you then had a massive stress,
Yeah.
like a marital breakdown or infection or COVID?
So this is one of the common themes that we see, that when you're reaching the plateau phase, you don't have very much resilience. And any additional point of stress that comes in here drops your performance significantly. So you go from a 9 out of 10 performance to a 0 or 1 out of 10. And this is a common theme that we find in many of the patients who come with an infective stress trigger of, say, COVID, that then pushes them off the performance curve down in this very sharp dip into 1 out of 10, let's say, in terms of performance.
A bit like COVID potentially being the straw that broke the camel's back. So in itself, it may not be the biggest stress in the world, but it's a stress on an already very stressed system.
Correct. And what I'd like patients to think about is, on this curve, this Dodson Law curve, you can stack up many such curves in very many domains in your life. Your mental stress, emotional stress, maybe of relationships, what's happening at home with your family, your mother who might be unwell, or your children who you have to get to a different school, or exams. And wherever you are in life, stack up all those curves together. You will often find, or what we often see, is that the people who do suffer with prolonged stress or autonomic dysfunction after long COVID already had pre-existing plateau phases, which means that their stress curve wasn't linear. They were really pushing
point.
at the point of breaking down.
When they didn't have much reserve or slack in their system to help them compensate.
Yes. So this is one aspect that's really important to understand, because it's often the case that patients come to my clinic and say, it was COVID, and you have to do everything you need to do about COVID. So measure or talk about spike proteins, what other processes going on from an immunological point of view, or blood clotting or microvascular dysfunction point of view, because it's the COVID that has set me off, and it must be the COVID, and treating whatever process that COVID has started will make me better. But oftentimes, actually, the longer you are away from COVID, let's say long COVID hit you 3 years ago and you're still struggling today, in my opinion, it's no longer the active component of COVID that keeps you here. We have to think back about all the other things that will bring
environment
that brought us to this point.
And let's just think of some examples of the stress that might be. You mentioned looking after parents, looking after children. Examples of physical stress might be lack of sleep.
Yes.
It might be even doing too much, fitting too much into your day.
Yes.
Partying, doing too much exercise. Examples of emotional stress might be...
Well, say for example, not really feeling grounded enough in your relationship, either in your career or at home, because COVID has really physically depleted you. You don't have the energy to put into your relationships, and that in itself is a stress. And I would say even something simple like reading a book or attending a Zoom meeting is a high enough cognitive stress load that is often enough to make you fatigued and enough to trigger a worsening in all your symptoms. So you may not be physically active, but you could be very emotionally active and active in your brain to try and process information that you could process very easily before. But this is now no longer something that you can do.
Yeah. So we've got physical stress, emotional stress, cognitive stress. I suppose there are other things like environmental stress, if you're cold, if you don't have a good shelter or things like that. Social stresses with relationships.
Yes. And
financial stress.
Yeah, environmental stress can include loud sounds that prevent you from sleeping, or even softer sounds which you could sleep through before but now irritate you so much, right?
Yeah.
So it just could be, and the lighting and the fact that you just feel and become more sensitized to the things around you. So when you're stressed internally, your immunity also takes on a vigilant role. So just like you become hypervigilant in all 5 external senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, smell, so your immunity can also be on a hypervigilant mode. And these can also be stressors. So people who are in this stage often have very acute sound and light sensitivity. So they wear dark glasses, they like a quiet environment, because even a sensory trigger can provoke the performance decline.
Yes. And so for people that are recognizing themselves in this description, who have stacked up these stresses and then have had a stress like COVID or something else and are now experiencing the consequences, what should they do?
So I think the first thing to understand is that there are multiple facets of stressors in your life above and beyond COVID. And when you come and see a doctor, we can often think about the physical stresses, and that's what we're good at, and that's what we can measure quite well. Now, that's not the only thing, because even if, for example, your blood pressure was low and every time you stood up, your blood pressure drops and it triggers the adrenaline reaction, the stress reaction to keep your blood pressure up.
Orthostatic stress. Yeah.
Exactly. And even if that's treated well by your doctor, maybe by encouraging you to drink more, have more electrolytes, wear compression stockings, and taking drugs perhaps like midodrine to improve your blood pressure, you still need to think about the other components that we've talked about extensively today, including mental, emotional, career, finance, relationship stress, because those are things that your doctors typically will not cover. But you've got to try and think of those things preceding your COVID and what changes you can make in your current state to either accept where you are now and be comfortable with accepting where you are now, rather than this great expectation mismatch. So you feel you should be able to get to a full day's work and attend back-to-back Zoom meetings, and actually your body and your cognitive state cannot get you there. That in itself shifts your curve. And it's a stress shifter that puts you down this curve, right, and keeps you there.
Yes, and of course the temptation for somebody who's experiencing this, who's had COVID or has long COVID or is stressed, is to think, I want to get back to the level of performance I was at that sweet spot in the curve. All I have to do is put in the right amount of effort. And we know that doesn't work, don't we? We know that actually it's not as easy as that. And tell us a bit more about that.
Yeah, so when you come back down the curve, you actually, in my view, have to come way back and work your way up again. And it's also about being able to understand where you are now and have a realistic expectation of where you should go on a step-by-step basis.
And to almost plot yourself on a much flatter looking curve to say, I'm going to put in a much smaller amount of stress to get a much smaller amount of performance. So I'm going to change my expectations about what I can do.
Right, and as well as that, try and understand where you are on this stress curve. Most of us, or most of the patients, will be right down there after the great steep fall. But to peel yourself back up the curve and to understand and be kind to yourself, to know you want to stay on the linear bit of the curve, not on the plateauing bit of the curve. And if you stay on that linear curve, understand where you are. Because if you're only performing a little bit and every unit of stress you put into the system, you can still gain performance, then perhaps you can start to push on. But you need a reset to start off with.
And I think another thing that's very difficult is, my curve might look different from yours.
Exactly.
Or, you might be able to put in 1 unit of stress and, do 3 meetings a day, whereas I might be able to do half a meeting a day. And it's quite hard to not to sort of compare yourself to other people who you think are similar to you, isn't it? And do you have any tips for that excruciating temptation of comparison?
Yeah, we can't all be like Elon Musk. And we can't all sleep for 4 hours a day like Margaret Thatcher used to do and still perform at high levels. So we need to find our level.
And accept it.
But also
and embrace it.
We need to feel what is right for us. And this is coming back to a level of understanding and being guided, dare I say it, Mel, by your intuition, because only you will know what actually, when you look deep inside, what has caused you to be stressed out at this stage. And one simple thought experiment that I would urge patients to do is to ask yourself what were the things I was doing before I had that acute stressful event, whether it's a breakup in a relationship or COVID. It's not the COVID that I want you to think about, it's what you were doing the 6 months before. And oftentimes you'll see a pattern, and then you try and work on that pattern or break that pattern.
Thank you. And Boone, just tell us one last time, what's the curve called?
The curve is called the Yerkes-Dodson Law curve, Yerkes-Dodson Law, Yerkes-Dodson Law.
Thank you so much. That's really interesting.
Thank you.